Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hey, Jackie, guess what? It's Plutus Awards season, but our audience won't know what the Plutus Awards are. What are they?
Yay, woohoo! We are excited that we are in the running for several different categories for the Plutus Awards. And the Plutus Awards basically is giving important recognition to independent content creators in the financial space. It's been around for 10 plus years at least, right? I can't exactly remember how long, but anytime I saw that a content creator won a Plutus Award, that was a big deal. And it demonstrated that they were great in what they were doing in terms of the financial space as an independent creator.
Yeah, I mean, this would mean the world to us if you would consider going on to the website plutus.awardsplatform.com. That's plutus.awardsplatform, one word, .com. We're up for about 7 categories, Jackie, and one we're really proud of is the best new personal finance content creator audio. Now, we started 2 years ago. We've had over 1 million downloads, but we're still allowed, because of a miss last year, to be up for this new content creator award. It would mean the world to us if you would consider voting in this category.
Yeah. And like you said, even though it's been 2 years, we're still considered new. We've got podcasts that's been out there for 10 plus years and they've gotten really good at it. So we're proud to be still considered being in the best new personal finance content. Now, also, we've got several other categories, and one of those is Content Creator of the Year audio. So this is another great one that we believe we're deserving of it. And if you think that we deserve that and you want to do a little give back, we would love it if you would nominate us for that category as well.
Yeah, and there's People Choice Awards as well, and we're up for the one for audio.
Yeah, and then we've got the Plutus Storyteller Award. Bill, you know, we have some great storytelling on this show that are from the voice of late starters. And then you and I have shared our own story, as well as Becky. So the Storyteller Award definitely spoke to me. So I wanted to make sure, I was so glad to have us on the list for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, your stories are a pivotal part of the show. We late starters are here together to learn from each other, and your stories are critical to get out there to the financial independence community. Another category that we're up for is Best Traditional Retirement Content. You know, we do give hardcore information. It isn't all softcore. We are also hardcore.
Yeah, not only that, Bill, but a lot of us that are getting a late start maybe a little bit older, where we are planning for traditional retirement. We all want to reach financial independence, but when it comes to the retirement piece, perhaps we are in those traditional retirement ages. So we talk about things like Social Security. We've had something about Medicare. We've had a lot of CFPs and other financial professionals that are talking about even the traditional part of it. So this was a great category to be a part of as well. Another one is one that's close to my heart, is Best Personal Finance Content for Women. Our audience is 70+% women, and we have a lot of shows dedicated to that. We just recently had Carrie Carbonaro. I did a Women in Taxes webinar that I cross-pollinated to our platform, but speaking to women is a big part of our show and what we like to bring in.
Yeah, and lastly, in these categories, we're up for Best Personal Finance Content for Underserved Communities. We feel that the late starters are an underserved community. We are probably the only voice in the podcast world out there speaking to you, the catching up to fires, the late starters. This is a new thing for us, and we hope that you feel that you're being served.
Yeah, and if you think that, please support us in this way. We don't ask for much, and we certainly appreciate you tuning in every single Sunday and occasionally on Wednesdays. And if you think it's worthy of other people finding the show, please take the time to do it. I think there's a quick little registration, but you can get through it in 5 minutes. So if we could have 5 minutes of your time to do that, we would be so grateful. And you know, Bill, I also have the book Fire for Dummies and a little bit of my own platform. So I'm in the running as well for a few things, not competing competing with Catching Up to Five, but one of my favorite. So if you want to support me as well, I'm under the best new personal finance content creator written for Fire for Dummies. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, also the best new personal finance book. And we all think that's the case. Fire for Dummies for life.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I've shared a lot of the content from the book on the show, of course, but also I'm in the running for best financial advisor content. I am a CFP professional, so I got into that category. And then there's something called the Plutus Resilience Award. And I'm not sure if this is a new category or not, but this definitely spoke to me. I've openly shared my story to, get it out there, and hopefully it impacts other people or inspires other people by sharing my mistakes and things like that and how I bounce back. So resilience is a very important term for me, term of endearment, really. And then the last one, Bill, is Best Financial Independence Retire Early Content for Fire for Dummies. I literally wrote the book on financial independence and retire early. So that's the last one that I'm in. So for both Catching Up to Five and my book, we would love for you to take a minute and vote for these. Again, it's at plutus.awardsplatform.com. It has a quick little registration. You can be done in 5 minutes.
Yeah, you'll see this link in our newsletter. You'll see it in our show notes. And we just hope you feel as we do that we put out some stuff that is worth listening to. Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to Five. I'm Bill Yount with Jackie Cummings Koski, and we're very excited today to introduce you to a show that was recorded on Bogleheads on Investing a few weeks ago. And in order to introduce this show, we brought on two of our dear friends, Christine Benz and Bill Bernstein. Jackie, I am so excited to have them on the show because we need to have Bill back, and this is the hook to get him back on our show to talk about the history of investing and financial history, of which he's an expert. But let me tell you, Bill Bernstein is an American financial theorist, author, and former neurologist. He is known for his work on modern portfolio theory and economic history, as well as his books aimed at individual investors. He co-founded Efficient Frontier Advisors, an investment management firm. He holds a PhD in chemistry and an MD, and practiced neurology before shifting his focus to finance and history. He's authored several books, and I have to say, the very first book I read when I woke up as a late starter to investing was The Intelligent Asset Allocator, which was an interesting place to start. And he can maybe tell us about that, because that may be the most difficult book for the new investor to start with, because I had to get out a financial calculator to figure out how to read the book. But some of the books he's written are The Four Pillars of Investing, as well as The Investor's Manifesto. Historically, he's written The Birth of Plenty, A Splendid Exchange, which I love, and Masters of the Word. So I'm going to welcome Bill Bernstein for the first and hopefully not the last time to Catching Up to Five.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. And Bill, we have some smart people on this show, and Christine is no exception. She has been on the show twice before. We're so honored to have her back along with Bill. And they are both board members of the Bogle Center for Financial Literacy, and Christine serves as president. She is director of personal finance and retirement planning for Morningstar and co-host of the podcast, The Long View. She is also author of the book, How to Retire, 20 Lessons of a Happy, Successful, and Wealthy Retirement. And we're so glad to have them today to talk about a new initiative that we believe is very important to us and most of our listeners.
So Christine and Bill, a lot of our audience may not know, unfortunately, who Jonathan Clements is. You are both dear friends of his, as am I. I was very fortunate to meet him back in 2019 at the inaugural Jim Dahle conference, WinCon. And ever since then, we've been friends. He's been on the show. But our audience may not be as much as vintage. They may be a little younger. Christine, who is Jonathan Clements, and what does he mean to the financial literacy space?
Jonathan Clements has been a seminal figure in the personal finance space, a seminal figure for me personally in my trajectory. But many of us first became aware of Jonathan's work when he was the personal finance columnist for the Wall Street Journal for many years, and just consistently penned these excellent articles that cut to the quick of what investors needed to know and what they should just disregard with respect to their money. And so every day I would read the journal, and I quickly realized that Jonathan was the person who was just consistently giving people what they needed to know, not any fluff. And so he has written a number of super valuable books. And more recently, he's been engaged in a blog called Humble Dollar, which is a website that is geared toward individuals managing their finances. Jonathan contributes articles there, and he also curates a stable of contributors, many of whom are like-minded. So he has just been a tremendously influential figure in the Bogleheads community, as well as for investors at large. I think he has helped shape investors' well-being as much as or more than almost any figure that I can think of.
And Bill, how did you meet Jonathan? What is your experience with him? Give us a little personal flavor.
Well, Jonathan and I go back over 30 years. I mean, Christine, you must have been in elementary school when I first did. And he was one of these people who would answer all of his emails, no matter who you were. And back 30 years ago, he didn't know me from Adam. He was always gracious and helpful. And it didn't take me very long to realize all of the things that Christine said about him, which was that his advice was always to the point. And over the next 20 years or so, he acquired the kind of readership that I don't think any other financial journalist has. He acquired, I would say, almost maybe an elite readership of people who understood finance better than the readers of most financial columnists do. He understood market efficiency, and he taught that to his readers. And he also talked to his readers about the non-financial aspects of money management. It's not just how do I make a lot of money and how do I invest well. It's what's this money really for? And that was really where he excelled. And what he taught people was that if you think that if the purpose of money is to buy stuff, you've lost the game. All right. What money buys is not stuff. If that's what you think it buys, you're going to be miserable. What he taught people was that money buys time, and it buys autonomy, and it buys experiences and the opportunity to enjoy your life with the people that matter to you most. And, I think he left people in a much better place than almost any other financial writer that I know of.
Yeah, he wrote the book, How to Think About Money, which is one of his seminal works. And he, in his later years, and we talk about later years because unfortunately, as we'll hear about, his life is being cut short. And that's sort of been an evolution for him into a very transparent look at how do you plan for your own death. He was unfortunately diagnosed with terminal lung cancer that had metastasized approximately a year and a bit ago, and he was given a year to live. And he's taken that year to tell his audience about what it's like. What's interesting is he approaches it with humility and equanimity. He is at peace with this, and he is so strong. I find his courage so impressive. He's telling us not only how to live now, but he's telling us how to die well. Isn't that not true?
Very much so.
Yeah, I think so. It's been an inspiration to all of us who've dealt with him over the past 14 months since he's gotten his diagnosis. I have, in my years of practicing medicine, I don't think I've ever seen anybody approach their demise with such grace and good cheer. It's been quite a remarkable experience from my perspective.
Yeah, it's actually been very inspiring to me. I'm like, this is how I want to go out. And the initiative that we brought you guys on to talk about, and we're going to play a lot more detail about it. But I love the fact that this is how he lived. And now this is going to be his legacy forever, for however long he still has here. So he got with Bogleheads, and you guys can tell us a little bit more about it. But the new initiative is called Getting Going on Savings Initiative, a legacy of financial empowerment. We want to hear more about that. Christine, can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Sure, Jackie. Thank you. A number of us who knew Jonathan well when we heard of his diagnosis went to him and said, what can we do to honor you? We would love to have you see the fruits of your legacy while you're here. And so we had initially thought maybe it would be some sort of a financial journalism award and in Jonathan's name. And Jonathan's counterpoint was that there are way too many such things, and he wasn't really interested in that. What he was interested in was some sort of project that would help individuals, ideally young working adults, get going on savings and investing and start to recognize the benefits of long-term compounding. And so we set to work. We had many, many meetings. In fact, one of the best parts of the project has been being able to work with Bill and Jason Zweig and Alan Roth and Mike Piper and Karen D'Amato. That's kind of our core crew to discuss how we might do this, how we might stand up this project. And so we hit on this idea of making contributions to young working adults and trying to get them into a Roth IRA with perhaps a little bit of a nudge to consider something very minimalist like a target date fund. And operationalizing something like this, I won't bore you with the details, but it's a little bit of a lift because you can't make Roth IRA contributions in other people's names. They need to have earned income to make a Roth IRA contribution. There are lots of logistical hassles with getting something like this set up. But we have been working with a group aligned with MIT. It's called JPAL. Jason Zweig had written about JPAL in his work for the Wall Street Journal. And JPAL is an organization that is dedicated toward poverty alleviation in various forms and was interested in working with us on this project. And JPAL will iterate on our initial crew of folks whose contributions we will make, and they'll sort of try to help improve upon the pilot group. So if we find that people pull their money out shortly after making their contributions, or they don't add any additional funds, we'll work on making sure that the next group potentially have nudges to help improve their outcomes. So it's a work in progress, but the Bogle Center has been involved as the conduit. We're a 501c3 charitable organization, the Bogle Center, and we have been taking in donations to fund these contributions to young working adults. We've been very successful with fundraising so far, but we are still welcoming additional donations, but the donations then can be fully tax deductible for people who wish to contribute. And then on a separate track, funding this initiative, I'll let Bill talk about the book because Bill has done truly the heavy lifting on getting that book up and running, and it's been selling very nicely too. So Bill, maybe you can talk about that piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, before I talk about that, the other person I really want to give credit to that Christine mentioned was Jason Zweig, who more or less was Jonathan's successor at the Wall Street Journal. And Jason's focus is very similar to Jonathan's, but Jason is also very interested in the academic finance literature. And both Jonathan and Jason didn't really want anything to do with a journalism award or a direct educational effort as well, because of some of their experiences in that space. And Jason was the one who suggested, I know this academic research group that's very interested in the formative process for disadvantaged youths. And he was the one who got us hooked up with JPAL. He was the one with that connection. And it's been a very rewarding process. This is a very inspirational group of people that we're working with. One of the things that, and can't even for the life of me remember where the idea came from, but the idea was to put together a compendium of Jonathan's best columns. So Jonathan did do a lot of the heavy lifting on that. He was the one who picked out initially about 75 columns. We whittled it down to about 60 of them. And we put it together into a self-published book. All of the royalties go, of course, to the initiative. And the feedback we've gotten on the book is just spectacular. It's very, very highly rated on Amazon. It gets a 4.7, if you know what that means in Amazon's rating system. I mean, there are authors who would sell their mothers for that kind of rating. And it's sold very well. And the process of editing it and producing the book has been very rewarding. I mean, producing a book is really not a lot of fun, But in this case, it really was a very enjoyable and rewarding experience. I won't say it was fun, but it was very, very rewarding. I really greatly appreciate putting this together.
Well, this two-pronged approach to helping young people that are disadvantaged get involved in saving is really avant-garde. I think this is the future of giving with that warm hand, that while you're a live hand as opposed to the cold hand. You've shown Jonathan the power of his work by giving to him and giving to the world in the way he sees fit so that he can experience it while still alive. This is all what I think we should be focused on with regards to giving. Who wants to be the richest man in the graveyard? Let's give while we're alive. And this is one of those gifts that I think will keep on giving to the world. I look forward to reading that book because I never got a chance to grow up with Jonathan's columns. I didn't wake up till 8 years ago. And I think he is long since gone from the Wall Street Journal. So I didn't learn with him as he grew, but I can now learn from him in retrospect. So I really look forward to reading that book. And I want to say, Jackie, that Catching Up to FI has made a $1,000 donation to this foundation to be seed money for this. And we want to challenge our audience to do this as well. The first 4 donors that are able to give $250, and so 4 of you will make up $1,000 for another young person to have a Roth IRA. We will give you a free book, that Jonathan's book. So take a picture of your donation, send it to us at info@catchinguptofi.com, and we welcome the opportunity to send you a book of Jonathan's columns that you can read, and you will make a difference in some individual's life. Jackie, what do you think about this?
I think that is awesome. And we're very excited about it. And I could tell you guys that I'm one of those people that would have been ecstatic about something like this when I was in high school and starting college. I saved nothing when I was so young because I'm paying my way through school. I'm trying to work full time. The only thing I saved were these $2 bills behind me. So this had such a profound impact on me. And I know the type of people and the demographic you're serving and how critical that is. Now, for 1 second, I want to put my financial planner hat on. Okay. So the bill that just passed, it includes that you get a $1,000 charitable gift donation that you can deduct even if you're taking the standard deduction. So that's a very new thing. So if you do $1,000, you're going to be able to get a deduction and you don't even have to itemize. And me personally, I have this supersized HSA and I lean toward leaving a legacy for nonprofit organizations. So I have included the Bogle Center as a part of that because I've benefited so much from what you guys are doing. So just a few financial planning topics, and I hope that Jonathan will appreciate the fact that we threw a little bit of that in there. But this is so awesome. And Bill and I are so thrilled to support this, and we are behind you 100%.
Thank you both so much. We very much appreciate you shining the spotlight on the initiative, and we appreciate your generosity as well.
Before we close here our introduction, I want you to tell us a little bit about the Bogleheads Conference, because I started my conference life with FinCon, as I talked to you about. That will be in Portland this year. I moved towards Economy, which is a fantastic conference that occurs every year in Cincinnati. And then I moved into Bogleheads. And it seems to me that there's a synergy between Economy and Bogleheads Conference. And Bogleheads is really growing. Tell us where the conference is, how we can get involved, and can we get our Catching Up to FI listeners there this fall?
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill. The conference, the Bogleheads Conference, will be October 17th through 19th, 2025, and it'll be in San Antonio this year, right on the Riverwalk at the Hyatt Regency. We have a phenomenal slate of experts who will be there. Bill Bernstein will be there, of course, because he is on our board and as a Bogleheads regular. Alan Roth will be there. Karen D'Amato will be there. Rick Ferry. And then we'll also be bringing in Salim Ramji, the newish CEO of Vanguard. Ed Slott, the tax and IRA expert, will be making his Bogleheads debut this year. Jackie will be one of our speakers as well. And we are trying to address FI in the Bogleheads programming because we recognize there's an alignment there that many folks who are pursuing financial independence are very much on board with the minimalist sorts of portfolios that Bogleheads believe in. And so we have tracks that are geared toward people who are in the accumulation FI phase. Saturday afternoon, we'll have breakout sessions geared toward people who are at that life stage. So I really love the idea of bringing younger investors on board with Bogleheads. We're also offering a family discount this year that if you bring a non-spouse family member, whether a child, adult child is fine, sibling, whatever the case might be, you're eligible for a discount on your registration. So the goal is to try to bring younger folks and families to the conference as well.
Yeah, let me say two things about the conference. First of all, you won't go to a better staffed conference. I like to say that Christine has the biggest Rolodex of anyone I know, and she deploys that beautifully in selecting the speakers. And the second thing I want to say is just about the ambiance of the conference. I can remember the second one I went to was in 2003. And I remember getting on the plane and thinking to myself, why am I doing this? And then the moment I got to the conference, I realized these were the nicest group of people that I've ever met in my life. And every time I go to the conference now, that's what I look forward to. It's just the nicest bunch of people you'll ever want to meet. And very interesting people, too, people who have a lot to teach.
Well, you're the historian, actually, Bill, and the Bogleheads have been around since John Bogle's days, and may he rest in peace. He died before I was able to meet him. I didn't make it to the Bogleheads conferences that he was at, but this started in somebody's living room back in Miami. What was it, 10, 15 years ago?
2001, I believe. Yeah. Is that right, Christine?
That sounds right. Taylor Laramore's home in Florida was the site of the original kind of Bogleheads gathering, and Jack Bogle made an appearance there and thrilled the folks who were in attendance that night. It was sounds like it was a very special evening, and this incredible group has been going strong and arguably getting stronger in the ensuing 20 plus years.
If I'm not mistaken, the conference had 500 people at it last year, and you've expanded the number to 600 this year. So this is a coffee table conversation back in 2001 that is now a significant force in the financial independence movement. And I just want to see it keep growing. So I encourage our listeners to buy their ticket and go to San Antonio. Unfortunately, I will not be able to be there this year. I will be in South Africa on an experience for my 60th birthday. But Jackie will be there. She'll be talking. There will be other people from the FI community that you are familiar with. If you're not familiar with, say, Jonathan Clements or Bill Bernstein, there are going to be folks that you will be familiar with in the community, and they're going to be people your age. I've seen fathers bring sons. I've seen sons bring fathers who were late starters. It's an incredible experience, and as Bill said, the ambiance is great. I sat down with Bill Bernstein, Alan Roth, and Jonathan Clements over lunch and talked about small cap value. I mean, what more fun can you have?
Oh, Bill was on a playground for sure. So I will represent, and I am so excited. Now, Bill Bernstein, did you want to get last word in? Go ahead.
No, I mean, it was just a funny story about the first conference, which was that Mr. Bogle had been invited to speak in Miami at some conference. I think it was set up by the Miami Herald. And he wanted to bring a couple of his local fans, including Mel Lindauer and Taylor Laramore. And the Miami Herald said, no, you can't just bring anybody to this conference. And so Jack said, screw it, and went and instead of going to that part of the conference, wound up in Taylor's living room. And the Miami Herald looked at that and said, we better invite these people to our conference.
I love it. I had no idea. That's a great story. Good for him.
I hope I'm not slandering Miami Herald. I think it was them. But for which them was another group, I apologize to the Miami Herald.
Well, as always, there's great history in everything, and we learn from it. You're going to teach us about financial history in a future episode. Christine, I'm sure we'll have you back for yet another multitude of reasons and things that you can talk on. We want to focus in the near future on drawdown strategies, and you're a proponent of one, and Dana Anspaugh is a proponent of another, and Fritz Gilbert's a proponent of another. There are many ways to skin a cat, and we want to talk about not only the accumulation phase, but decumulation, and Bill may have a word on that as well. So at any rate, there's so much more to learn from these folks, so much more to talk about. Let's get into this podcast that they all recorded with Jonathan Clements. You'll hear his voice in this show, and you're going to learn a lot about his history and what this initiative, the Jonathan Clements Getting Going on Savings initiative, is going to do for the future. Thanks, guys, for being here to help us launch this on our show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill and Jackie. We appreciate it.
Welcome, everyone, to the 82nd edition of Bogleheads on Investing. And today we have a very special podcast. We have three guests, Jonathan Clements, Jason Zweig, and Christine Benz. And we'll be discussing the Jonathan Clements Getting Going on Savings Initiative and his new book, The Best of Jonathan Clements, Classic Columns on Money and Life. Hi everyone, my name is Rick Ferry and I am the host of Bogleheads on Investing. This episode, as with all episodes, is brought to you by the John C. Bogle Center for Financial Literacy, a nonprofit organization that is building a world of well-informed, capable, and empowered investors. Visit the Bogle Center at boglecenter.net, where you will find a treasure trove of information, including transcripts of these podcasts. Before we begin, I have one special announcement. Tickets for the 2025 Bogleheads Conference are now on sale at boglecenter.net. There is special early bird pricing, so you'll want to get your ticket soon. This year's conference will begin at noontime on Friday, October 17th, and run through noontime on Sunday, October 19th. It will be at the Hyatt Regency San Antonio Riverwalk Hotel, a beautiful location directly across from the Alamo, with lots to see and lots to do in the city of San Antonio. You'll find a list of speakers at the boglecenter.net website, and a full agenda will be up soon. I hope to see many of you there. In today's podcast, we have three special guests: Jonathan Clements, former personal finance columnist for the Wall Street Journal; Jason Zweig, current columnist for the Wall Street Journal; and Christine Benz, Director of Personal Finance and Retirement Planning for Morningstar. As most of you know, a year ago, Jonathan was diagnosed with a rare terminal cancer and has been battling to stay with us one day at a time. But that has not stopped him from his life's goal of continuing to educate people on good financial principles through his Humble Dollar website and a new program called the Jonathan Clements Getting Going on Savings Initiative, and our new book, The Best of Jonathan Clements, Classic Columns on Money and Life. We're going to be talking about all of this with Jonathan, Jason, and Christine, and discuss how you can help. So with no further ado, let's welcome Jonathan Clements, Jason Zweig, and Christine Benz. Welcome back to Bogleheads on Investing.
Rick, thanks for having us all on. It's great to be talking to you about the initiative.
Well, that's a great start to get going with the podcast. So, Jonathan, why don't you tell us, how did this initiative get started?
Well, I really am not the right person to be talking about it. I was approached about would I like a journalism award set up in my memory, and my response was absolutely not. The world has way too many journalism awards. I'm not sure that it needs another one. And so I said, well, if we're going to do something, let's do something to help young people get started as investors. And my initial idea, which seemed simple to me, but it didn't prove to be quite so simple, was that it would be great to take kids from disadvantaged families and get them started as investors by funding Roth IRAs with $1,000 on their behalf. And I threw this out there and thought, well, seems like a good idea. Should work.
Sorry, you said you threw that out there, but who did you throw it out there to?
I think my initial conversations were probably with Bill Bernstein, who's been involved with this, as has Mike Piper and Karen D'Amato. I mentioned this. Bill had one or two further conversations with me about it and said that there seemed to be some problems, but essentially I was cut out of the loop, which is a nice place to be. One of my goals in life is never to sit on a committee again. And so all this work was going on in the background, and I had absolutely nothing to do with it. So perhaps Jason or Christine could talk a little bit more about what's been going on.
Okay, so Christine or Jason, what happened after that?
Let's go in alphabetical order, Christine.
Okay.
Well, that's fine. I remember Jason and I kind of at the Morningstar conference talking about next steps here.
Yep.
So we, at the Bogle Center, the John C. Bogle Center for Financial Literacy, it includes some of the people that Jonathan just mentioned on its board. So Mike Piper, Karen D'Amato, Bill Bernstein, Alan Roth, ex of our board. We have this 501c3 that's dedicated to help improving financial literacy and wellness in the community. And we thought that perhaps we were well situated to help facilitate this because standing up a separate 501c3 seemed like a pretty big project. And we felt that our mission at the Bogle Center is enough aligned with Jonathan's vision that we were in a position to help, that we could serve as the repository for donations. And then the next step from there was really figuring out, well, who is our partner organization to help operationalize this? Because the Bogle Center is a fairly small operation, as you know, Rick, having been my predecessor as president. And so we were kind of casting about, looking for different entities that do some version of what we wanted to do here. And really that's where Jason picks up, because he came to us with an idea of a group that he had been familiar with, that he had written about. So Jason, maybe you want to talk about how JPAL entered the picture.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I'll echo some of what Jonathan said with a couple more details. I mean, he and I have been friends since early 1987. And one of my goals was to spare him all the nitty gritty, all the agonizing back and forth, the this won't work and the that won't work. And oh crap, we forgot about this. And a large part of the process of overcoming obstacles was dealing with things like what paperwork is going to be required, how do we make sure we comply with IRS rules, how do we make sure there's an appropriate place for the donations to go, how do we eliminate conflicts of interest. I mean, am I exaggerating, Christine? It was hundreds of
Yes.
hundreds of emails and numerous phone calls. And quite early on, I realized that we needed reinforcements. This was not a project that we could take on either individually or exclusively through the Bogle Center because it was too big and complicated. And so I thought of JPAL, which is an organization that does experiments in behavioral economics with the goal of reducing wealth and income inequality around the world.
Are they affiliated with any academic organization?
Yeah. So JPAL operates out of MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and its co-head is Esther Duflo, who won the Nobel Prize in economics for research that was largely driven through JPAL. And I wrote about them for the Wall Street Journal about a decade ago, maybe it was 2016. So I was familiar with them, and I thought, what could be better than setting this program up as an experiment? Because what JPAL specializes in is RCTs, randomized control testing, where you take two groups of people and you expose one to the experimental condition and the other is the control group, and you see what happens to each group. So that's where it evolved, and that brought in a whole new group of people, actually two groups, because this program will be at the ground level operated by a youth employment organization that is operated by the city of Boston.
So there's this group that is going to be the subject of this experiment, and we'll describe what the experiment is in a minute here. But who chose that group? Was that MIT?
Yeah. Well, first of all, because of the eligibility rules for a Roth IRA and the importance of being able to track the participants over time, they wanted it to be run through an organization that JPAL has a longstanding relationship with, because they've already put the data gathering infrastructure in place.
Though before we get into the administration of this study and initiative, let's describe exactly what it is. I mean, what are we studying? Christine.
Sure. So the goal of this pilot program will be to get these young people investing. So the study will give them the funds and a little bit of direction about how and where to invest the money, with a little bit of a nudge into a target date vehicle. And then JPAL will study what happens after that.
Just so I understand, the study is about, if you give these young people $1,000 and give them educational material, in this case that might nudge them into a target date fund of some sort. The idea is see what happens in the future if they build upon that, or if they just take the money out of the account and spend it, and how that compares people who you did not give any money to. Is that how it's supposed to work?
Yeah, exactly. And if I can jump in for a second, there's research from around the world, much of which has been done by people associated with JPAL, showing that cash grants can be a motivation for future saving. And we don't know whether this program will work. These young people are under a lot of pressure. They come from poor families and undereducated. So we don't know how they're going to behave when they get $1,000 in an account that is created for them.
In a Roth account.
Exactly. Will they immediately withdraw it? Will they leave it there and forget about it? Will they leave it there and add to it as they start earning income of their own, which of course is what we're trying to see if we can incentivize. So that's the purpose of the experiment, to figure out whether it will work, what works best, and with luck, the lessons that we acquire through this experiment will apply more broadly throughout society, and we can help motivate young people across the country and across the world to become long-term savers and investors, which is a pretty good way to honor Jonathan.
Let me just jump in here. One thing I want to clarify is that, while this initial experiment is going to be based out of Boston, the notion is that this is not going to be Boston only. The hope is that if it's successful, that it'll get rolled out into other cities around the country. It's just for this initial summer program that will launch this summer, right, Jason?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's a very good point, Jonathan. And as Christine said, this is a pilot program. It's testing the initial feasibility, like, can this be done? What do we need to tweak to make it more effective? What are the problems with young people maybe who don't read well, or who don't know the difference between a stock and a bond, or who've never heard the term mutual fund or ETF? So there's going to be a lot of trial and error initially, but I can tell you, in my Wall Street Journal inbox, I have at least a dozen emails from readers in other cities saying, how can we find out more about this program, because we want to try it here? And the real purpose of this experiment is to make that possible, so that we can take what we learn in Boston and enable people in Minneapolis and Chicago and Los Angeles and San Antonio and the other places I've heard from to do it there as well.
One thing we really liked about JPAL and its approach was that they're constantly iterating on what's working, what's not working. And so we'll be able to look at this pilot program and see maybe incentives would help get people to add additional funds to the account.
Like a matching of some sort.
Yeah, it's not one and done saying we have fixed this issue and we're going to go forward with it forevermore. It's saying here's something we're trying, and then we may try to improve it as we go along. So I think that was a very agreeable approach to all of us, because there are no clear-cut solutions to helping people emerge from poverty.
The other great advantage of doing a project like this through an organization like JPAL is, of course, being run by a team of academics. One of their goals is to publish the findings as a research article in an academic journal, which will be, of course, widely circulated around the world. Similar organizations elsewhere will have that free intellectual property to build on and to try to create similar programs elsewhere. And if you think about techniques like automatically defaulting employees into a target date fund that has become very popular in the United States, or automatic rebalancing, all of those ideas originally came out of academic research and have been applied successfully in the real world. So we hope, if this project takes hold, that it'll have a similar effect.
So there's three parts to this that will get young people enrolled in this program. And I was not involved in the creation of it. I'm learning as I go along. Number one, someone will select the group of people who will get these $1,000 grants. And number two, they will, with some help, I assume, they will open up a Roth account, and $1,000 will be contributed from the Bogle Center, correct, Christine?
Well, yes. So the contributions are coming in through the Bogle Center. Contributors have the opportunity to earmark their contributions to this initiative.
And the book also that was published, that money will also come into this. Does that go through the Bogle Center too, the book revenue, which we'll get to later?
The idea is that the revenues will come in through the Bogle Center, and we will then contribute them out to the initiative.
So the Bogle Center, being a nonprofit 501c3 organization, has the ability to do this. And so you are facilitating this through the Bogle Center. So that's the second thing. The account is open and it's funded with $1,000. But the third thing that's happening is these people who are granted the $1,000 Roth are going to get educational material. And Christine, I understand that's also coming from the Bogle Center.
That has been a collaborative effort, Rick, where the goal is to give the participants at point of purchase enough information to make a good decision, but we don't want to overwhelm them. We didn't want to put them through a whole curriculum, make them take a test. We want to give them enough information to make what we hope will be a good choice. So we've crafted some materials about what is a target date fund with some basic detail on what investing in stocks entails, what investing in other safer assets might entail. And so the trick was to provide them with enough information, but we certainly didn't want to overload anyone. And I've been compelled by some of the research at various institutions that have looked at financial education kind of at point of purchase, that if you can give people a little bit of information to make a good choice when taking out an auto loan or allocating a 401k for the first time, those can be very powerful interventions, perhaps more so than putting someone through a long curriculum where they're learning things, but they're not in any position to put them to work. So that was the goal here, was just to give a little bit of information at point of purchase.
Yeah, let me jump in here. I think what the research has shown us is that, if you do put somebody through a general personal finance curriculum, that the information that they get and the learnings they get degrade relatively quickly. And after maybe 18 months, they're as butt ignorant as I was when I was 18. But if you jump in when they're about to take out a mortgage, or they're about to get a credit card, or they're about to fund an IRA, and the information is immediately, to use a word I hate, immediately actionable, then it can be super effective. And so in this particular case, these kids will be getting information right when they're making a decision. And with any luck, it will prove super useful to them.
So they're selected to participate in the program. then they are given help to open a Roth, and then the money is going to come into their Roth, and at the same time, the Bogle Center is going to provide them with this educational package. Is that the way it works?
Basically, the Bogle Center through JPAL.
Through JPAL.
JPAL will be doing this sort of hands-on work with the participants to give them the materials.
Is this material available online for anybody to look at? So if I have a 18-year-old grandchild, I used to say child, but now grandchild, 18-year-old grandchild, I could also take the same information that these young people are getting and give it to my grandson?
We haven't thought about that, Rick, but that's not a bad idea. Materials were written explicitly for this sort of point of purchase decision making, but I think we could readily put them online on the Bogle Center website.
It's a very good idea.
This is very exciting, and different ways you can participate. If I wanted to give to this initiative, I could either make a donation to the John C. Bogle Center for Financial Literacy for specifically this cause, and I could use my donor advised fund to do it. John C. Bogle Center is obviously a registered 501c3 organization, or you could buy the book. And the book is The Best of Jonathan Clements, Classic Columns on Money and Life. Jonathan, this is your 12th book, as I counted. Is that correct? 12 books?
You know, Rick, after a certain point, it's like with my marriages, you don't count anymore. But more than one. But before we get into this, Rick, I want everybody who's listening to appreciate just how incestuous this whole project is. So as Jason mentioned, I've known Jason since 1987. We were the lowest form of life at Forbes magazine. I was a fact checker, and then the next fact checker to be hired was Jason. And we worked together at Forbes for 3.5 years. We had lunch together almost every day. That was in the days when you could wander out into Greenwich Village and get a lunch for under $5, which is our specialty.
Yep.
And then, you think about the other people involved in the project. I've known Bill Bernstein since the 1990s. Obviously, I've known Christine, Alan Roth, Mike Piper, and Karen D'Amato. I used to work side by side with Karen D'Amato at the Wall Street Journal. And then the fact that this has been done under the auspices of the Bogle Center, I mean, that I love, because I love Jack Bogle. I thought he was just, an iconic man. I mean, so charismatic. And to have this project operating under the Bogle Center is really great. I mean, it's just, from my point of view, not that my medical condition is a dream come true, but in terms of this particular project, it really is a dream.
Well, to work on it was a dream as well, Jonathan, to have communications daily with Bill and Jason and Karen and Alan and Mike was a ton of fun. And I would also say, from the Bogle Center's perspective, Andrew Bogle, Jack's son, is on our board. And when Andrew heard about this project that we were working on and the potential for the Bogle Center to be involved, his directive was go, go, go. He felt that it was very aligned with his dad's vision, and he was utterly supportive. And we feel that that's sort of like the family support as well, which is a lovely thing.
Great ideas, everybody. Thanks for all the hard work, and hopefully we learn a lot from this. So, getting to the book. Alan Roth wrote in the book, Jonathan has consistently reminded his readers that money is not an end in itself, but a means to achieve what truly matters: security, freedom, and the ability to nurture what we hold dear. His columns are not about maximizing wealth at any cost. They are about finding balance and aligning our financial decisions with our values. And that really, I thought, encapsulates you, Jonathan. And in your book, The Best of Jonathan Clements, you selected what you believe are 62 of your best columns, and it was combined in this book. So tell me about that process.
So initially, I actually picked out, I think, 75 columns, and we ended up down at 62 because, as both Jason and Christine can attest, one of the secrets to being a longtime columnist is repetition. Repetition without people noticing. So you just keep saying the same stuff and hope that nobody actually realizes that you said the same thing 3 months earlier. Well, as I went through the 1,000+ columns I wrote for the Wall Street Journal, there was a heck of a lot of repetition. And so it was really just a question of narrowing it down to some distinct columns that covered different topic areas. So that was where the, we ended up at the 62. The other thing about being a columnist, and I think both Jason and Christine can also attest to this, is, you don't want to be the typical Wall Street writer where, what you're saying hinges on the stock of the day or, the market movement of the month or whatever the hell it is, right? Because if you're doing that, you're doing a disservice to your readers. So what you need to do is somehow speak eternal truths while making it seem timely. And that is the trick to being a columnist. And so, in a sense, what Alan is talking about in what he wrote for the book is about, trying to figure out what it is that we can say of lasting value as columnists, but packaged up in such a way that it has some immediate appeal. And so with many of these columns, that was my goal. I remember so many times going in to talk to my editor at the Journal, and he's like, well, what's the news hook? What's the news hook? And I was like, do we really need to have a news hook? Can't we just run a decent article? And so in some cases with these columns, what I did is actually remove the news hook when we put them into the book, because the news hook was not important. What was important was the meat of the pieces. And I'm pleased with the way the book came out, though I would also say, and I think, again, Jason and Christine will echo my thoughts. When you go back and you look at the stuff that you wrote, 20, 30 years ago, it's like, whoa, that was really not very good.
Or, what I found when I did a lot of writing for Forbes is that the articles that you don't think are very good are actually the ones that are the best. It's the ones that resonate with people. I write an article and I'd say, well, that was just terrible, but I'm going to publish it anyway. And people rave about it, how great it was. And then I write something that's really insightful, really important to me. And
nobody cares.
It doesn't get any, nobody cares.
Well, this does remind me of what I call Zweig's law, which is, if I like it, you hate it. And if you hate it, I like it.
Yeah, Jason and I have had this conversation, actually, that the amount of research you put into an article is inversely proportional to its popularity.
Exactly.
So if you work really hard on a piece, it's going to be like crickets when it comes out.
Yeah.
And if you whip it off in 5 minutes, people are going to love it.
Exactly.
So you started out with 75 and whittled it down to 62. So tell us about the process.
What happened in this case was that I came up with the initial 75. Bill Bernstein went through and put them into categories, and he wrote little intros for each of the chapters, as folks will see. And then, I took it, and I was like, this sounds a little bit like this one. So that's how we went from 75 to 62. And then the greatest human impulse is to edit other people's work. I went through and and revised Bill's categorization, and that's how we ended up with the book. And then along the way, Jason, Bill, and Alan Roth all wrote pieces that appear in the book, either at the front or the back.
Very good. And you ended up with 11 sections, and if you don't mind, and we've got some time to spend on each section, and so we could all maybe throw in some input. So the very first section is basically categorized as talking with family about money, and this you put up right up front, how to talk with parents, children, so forth.
Well, in the end, why do we manage money? Why do we accumulate money? I mean, we, for most of us, we have a core group of people we care about deeply, and we want not only our own financial security, but we also want to make sure that they're okay financially. I say to people, either you're in the circle or you're not, and if you're in the circle, I will do everything in my power to make sure that you are okay. So family is not necessarily a blood relative, but it's whoever is in the circle and the people that you will go to the ends of the earth to make sure they're okay.
Jonathan, I have to say that this is one of my favorite sections of the book because it's so differentiated. Discussions of talking to your kids about money, trying to inculcate healthy financial decision-making in them. When I looked at this section of the book, it was one of my favorites because I just don't see this discussion in a lot of other personal finance writing about how to talk to children, how to help develop them as savvy financial human beings. And I think the really happy part of this story is that your kids have generally taken what they learned to heart, right? I mean, things turned out here, which is a really nice sort of end cap to this piece of the book.
Well, I treated my kids sort of as financial guinea pigs, and I experimented with them in all kinds of different ways. Fortunately, all the manipulation doesn't seem to have left too many scars, and in fact, it's had a generally good output. Both my kids are quite financially responsible. I think when I was on your podcast, Christine, I talked about how my son, during his 7 years getting his PhD, he was getting $30,000 a year as a stipend, and over the 7 years, he managed to save $100,000.
Bravo.
Yeah, that's frugality. The only thing I worry about a little bit is that maybe they learned the frugality a little too well. You can't overdo it. You don't want to be so frugal that, as Alan Roth always likes to talk about, you don't want to be the richest person in the graveyard.
I would just add that the temptation for people who think about money and investing a lot is to think about the how. Should I buy this index fund or that one? Should I hedge my foreign currency exposure? And Jonathan wants us to refocus on the why. It's like, why are you doing this? And that's a really important message that gets overlooked.
A great point. The next topic in section number 2, your money in your house. And Jonathan's view is your house eats your money. Tell us about that.
So over the course of my life, I've owned 4 houses, and yes, all of them have eaten money. And a lot of people, do this creative accounting where they somehow turn their houses into fabulous investments. But if you sit there and you run the numbers on how much it costs to own a house, all those remodeling projects, all the money you spend on homeowners insurance and property taxes, and how much you fork over in mortgage interest and so on, and of course the opportunity cost of where else the money could be, houses are not a great investment. They're not terrible. I've owned one house after another. I like owning the place that I live, but I would never jump up and down and say a house is be all and end all. It does really 2 things for you. One, it fixes your housing costs. If you buy a house, you know what your housing costs are going to be pretty much from year to year. And 2, it's a form of forced savings as you pay down the mortgage.
Christine?
This section is so interesting because to me it tackles household capital allocation, which is the thing that we don't talk that much about. We sort of move straight to investment allocation and the decisions you're making around your investment portfolio. But all of us have a set of choices that precede investing in our portfolios. And I love that this section discusses that decision making squarely. And I was struck by how prescient some of the columns were about over allocating to real estate, that they preceded the big real estate market meltdown where Jonathan is cautioning about not going overboard on improving your home, on overinvesting in properties. So that was something that was quite striking, was just how prescient those conversations were. And I'm not sure there were that many people talking about over allocating to real estate prior to the real estate crisis. Certainly there were murmurings, but it's impressive how these columns seem to predate the problem.
Yeah, and I guess the only note I would add is that if you look at data from Robert Shiller, for example, the Yale University economist, you'll see that the long-term real return after inflation, the long-term real return on residential real estate is 0. That's based on roughly a century of data. And there have been more recent studies that go back to the 17th century. And the consistent finding is that your home is not a particularly good investment in a financial sense. But I love the way Jonathan brings across the fact that this, like a lot of other investments, is not necessarily about the financial return. I mean, you get a psychic return from investing in your own home, even if you don't necessarily get a high financial return.
All great points. The next few sections have to do with investing. We start out with your money and the markets, and then the math of investing, how the media tries to influence you on investing, the financial industry. So I want to sort of group all those together about investing. And Jonathan, if you could summarize, the main topics. And by the way, within this there's a list chapter, which has lists, columns that are lists. And I noticed you like lists.
Every columnist loves lists.
And lists are fun to read, too.
Readers love lists.
Yeah.
There are a couple of sort of different themes within these. I mean, one is like the basics of investing. And, I've done this column countless times. 10 things you should know about investing, about how you're not going to beat the market and the importance of paying attention to costs and so on and so on. But another aspect of these pieces, and I think Jason could talk to this much more readily than I because it's really in his wheelhouse rather than mine, is in the late 1990s, behavioral finance really exploded. It hit the popular consciousness, and while Kahneman and Tversky had been looking at this stuff since the 1970s, suddenly all kinds of other academics were weighing in, tons of research was coming out, and for me as a columnist, that research gave me extra legs. I mean, look, if you're trying to figure out something to write every week, and there's a new interesting piece of research, it's like, hooray, that's another one down. And this was really a golden era of behavioral finance research, late 1990s, early 2000s. And so that also played into a lot of those pieces that appeared. And Jason, of course, during this time, you came out with your book, Your Money in Your Brain.
Yeah. Jonathan, as he often is, he's being overly modest. He was really the pioneer in bringing attention to this field. This research had been around for a while, and certain people in the investing world were aware of it, but it had never really gotten much attention. And Jonathan really brought it to the fore and introduced the idea that, as I like to put it, it's not investments that make or lose money, it's investors. And he really brought to the public consciousness the idea that you should look in the mirror as an investor. Don't just look out the window at all those stupid people down on the street, but look in the mirror and look at the dummy who's looking back at you.
I love the sections on investing. I have to say, from a personal standpoint, I learned so much about investing, but also talking to investors from Jonathan, from those columns. I wrote about this on Morningstar.com, just how influential he was to me in terms of kind of shaping the direction I wanted to go in with my career. Did I want to be someone who was sort of adding to the confusion and the cacophony about investing, or did I want to be someone who was helping to clarify? And it seemed like with every column, Jonathan was there clarifying and helping. And that is a through line in all of these columns, is just helping with the advice about having a decent savings rate, having a sane asset allocation, having a plan that you can live with through a variety of market climates, that those things would put you on a firm financial footing. And I was also struck as I read through the columns, just frankly, the courage in them, in that so many of the entities that Jonathan would criticize, the financial advice industry, certainly the asset management industry with its constant production of various products of varying degrees of helpfulness to investors, he was very critical. And I found power in that. And it really helped, I think, give me courage to say some of the same things when I was eventually charged with helping investors in the same way.
When I was at the Wall Street Journal through this period, the managing editor for, I think, pretty much the entire period was Paul Steiger. And really wonderful individual, super supportive. And even though I was saying stuff that people on Wall Street didn't necessarily like, Paul was always supportive. I remember one time a delegation from Merrill Lynch came in to complain about something I'd written. And so we ended up in the big editorial conference room on the 9th floor, and sitting around, and they're whining about this and that, and they'd cooked up a bunch of numbers that contradicted a set of numbers that I had, and their numbers were just flat out wrong. And so we sat there, and they made their spiel. I took it apart, and as we walked out of the conference room, Steiger leaned into me and whispered into my ear, "They didn't lay a hand on you." and that was the way it was, So even though, we were obviously taking their advertising dollars, it wasn't expected that we should, kiss their feet. It was okay to be critical, which was wonderful. So coming back to the stuff about behavioral finance, as I went through my time at the Journal, there were really sort of 4 sets of interesting research on what I would say is the human side of money. Gave me sort of a few extra years as a columnist, and one was behavioral finance. Then there was an area, again, Jason did much more on this than I did, but neuroeconomics. Then there was the whole area of evolutionary psychology, which is very closely connected to neuroeconomics and how it influences our thinking. And then an area that became particularly close to my heart, and there's a chapter within the book devoted to some of the columns on happiness research. And those 4 areas, happiness research, evolutionary psychology, neuroeconomics, and behavioral finance, to this day remain great, fruitful areas for anybody who wants to write about human behavior, and particularly human financial behavior.
Sounds complicated, but you break it down to a user level in the book. I can read this stuff and I can understand what you're talking about.
I guess the only real trick here, and not much of a trick because I could figure it out, was just to look at the research and say, what does this mean for the average individual? How can I take the insight that some poor PhD has spent, years looking into and turning it into, 1 or 2 nuggets that people can use in everyday life? And that's the trick. I, as a reporter, as a columnist, I hated picking up the telephone. I didn't like interviewing people, but I enjoyed reading the research. So instead of calling people up on the phone, I would just scroll through and see what was the latest research out there and read the papers and see if I could somehow turn it into an article.
My dad had an expression that I think really applies to Jonathan's work in this area. My dad used to say the hardest thing in life is to make something look easy. And Jonathan makes it look easy. So don't underestimate how much work it takes. And don't believe him when he says it.
Well, Jason, you knew from early on. You saw the chewed up pens.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
When I was at Forbes magazine, Jason and others would go into the metal desk and pull out the drawer, and there would be a series of pens that had been, the tops of which had been chewed to nothing.
Smithereens,
Yes.
smithereens. And I would add that's a practice that you continued at the Wall Street Journal.
I'll paraphrase Alan Roth on this, who said there's a complexity to getting to simplicity.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I want to get into money over your lifetime. I found this section to be really interesting to me. In other words, what is it all about?
So money over your lifetime, one of the things that right towards the end of my time at the Journal, so 2007, 2008, the concept I became super interested in was human capital, and how human capital is really, thing around which you can arrange your entire financial life. Your human capital, drives your ability to borrow money. It drives your ability to save. It drives your portfolio's allocation. You want more in stocks early in your career when you still have this big paycheck coming in. You want less as you head towards retirement. It also drives your insurance need. To protect your human capital, you need health insurance, you need life insurance, you need disability insurance. So human capital, of all the concepts out there, when it comes to defining your financial life, is probably the most important. And so that's really where that section kicks off.
This section is a great reminder to people that you can think about your human capital as resembling, maybe it resembles a stock, maybe it resembles a bond. If, for example, if you're a tenured high school teacher and you're fairly young, your human capital is probably a lot like a bond. You've got job security, you've got decades ahead of you, So because your human capital, which is a portion of your overall portfolio, is quite safe and secure, you can afford to take more risk with the financial part of your capital. Somebody whose human capital is like a bond can probably safely afford to invest quite a bit more in stocks than somebody whose human capital is probably more like a stock.
People who work in the medical field are generally, a human capital is like a bond. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because it's not economically cyclical. People get sick all the time, get hurt all the time, so it has nothing to do with the economy. Whereas maybe if you're in manufacturing or something, it's more like a stock.
Yep.
So that may have some effect. And even in technology workers, a programmer or something, I mean, you may have cyclical earnings, the ups and downs of the technology industry. So you're more like a stock than a bond. And so you may adjust your portfolio accordingly based upon your human capital and the potential to have consistency of human capital. It's all very interesting. Christine?
I love the components of the book that delve into retirement and finding enough, determining whether you've actually saved enough to retire, and quantifying enough, as Jonathan discusses in the book, is a very subjective question, helping people determine whether they have saved enough and how much they can reasonably spend, how much they can give to their loved ones. Some of the columns on that topic, I think, are incredibly valuable and do stand the test of time.
So I'd like at this point to just put in a plug for Christine's book that came out last year, which I think is superb, absolutely superb.
And I interviewed Christine for How to Retire, the name of the book, in episode number 73.
What it speaks to me, is the complexity and difficulty and emotional trauma of giving up your human capital and moving into retirement. Retirement is hung out there as this sort of prize at the end of this 4-decade journey of saving and investing. But in fact, when you retire, you not only lose a paycheck, you lose your identity, you lose social connections, you lose your emotional, intellectual, and physical stimulation. I mean, it is a trauma, and I don't think it's appreciated enough. And if you read some of the interviews that Christine does in that book, you really come to appreciate how difficult retirement is, and it's not disappearing off into the sunset for 20 or 30 years of fun. It's quite different.
Well, thanks for that, Jonathan. And it's a badge of honor that you wrote the foreword for the book. I so appreciate that. And my soundbite on the book is just that this is not a math problem. And that's a message to the Bogleheads who might be listening, who sometimes get a little lost in the spreadsheets, that there are many more dimensions to retirement planning than some sort of number.
Yeah, and Christine's book is so good that my 4-month-old puppy ate the entire thing. And after my puppy ate the entire book, I immediately went out and bought another copy and put it on the top shelf where it's safe as a reference.
Thank you for that.
Okay, the last part of Jonathan's book covers what is a rich life. Jonathan, you talk about this thing called a rich life and money and well-being, and I want to describe, in your own words, here you are, right, with your situation. I mean, what is a rich life to you?
So in the book is the final column that I wrote for the Wall Street Journal in 2008 before I departed for Citigroup for 6 years, or as Jason and my other friends from the journalism world would call, to the dark side. And in that final column for the journal in 2008, I said that the rich life, the happy life, sort of consists of 3 key components. I mean, one is, yes, you do want a sense of financial security. And that is why we do all this saving and investing over many decades. But 2, you want social connections. You want to be surrounded by people you love. And all the research says that having a rich social network is a huge source of happiness. And then 3rd, you need a sense of purpose. You need a reason to get out of bed in morning. And it's not just during your working years, it's also during your retirement. People head off into retirement and say, I'm going to relax. No. You head off into retirement, and after 2 months of relaxing, you're bored out of your brain, and then you need a reason to get out of bed in the morning. So here I am. I don't know how many more months I have. My best guess, based on how my treatment is going and so on, is that I might have 7 or 8 more months. I don't know that it's going to be much more than that. That's better than I was initially promised. When I was diagnosed 12 months ago, I was given 12 months to live. So I've made it to that, and at this point I'm still in okay shape, but for those who are curious, my treatment plan is failing, and so I'm trying to get onto a new treatment plan. I'm trying to get onto a clinical trial, but the cancer is continuing to spread. It's spreading up and down my spine. It's spreading in my brain. I've had frequent doses of radiation and so on, and I need a new treatment plan if I'm going to make it any more than sort of 7 or 8 months. So that's where I stand today. Nonetheless, despite all of that, despite the fact that I know that time is short, I do not get up every morning and binge watch Netflix. I get up every morning and think about what it is that I can do to have that sense of progress, that sense of striving, that sense that I'm doing something useful with my life. I can't tell you, that it's better than crack. Well, not that I've ever tried crack, but I think it's better than crack. To have that sense of purpose, to come to the end of the day and say, yeah, I accomplished something. It's really valuable. And for anybody out there who's trying to have a richer life, I would encourage them to figure out what it is that they are passionate about, what will make their days fulfilling, and focus on those things. And the wonderful thing about being financially independent and having a healthy amount of savings is that you can devote your life to the things you care about most. And I would encourage people to save and invest and manage their money with the goal of being able to lead the life that they want.
Jonathan, that's a very powerful message. Thank you so much for everything you've done, and thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Jason, for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you for the Bogle Center for pursuing this project. If this is the last thing I do and it works, I will happily take that as a legacy.
We all are so happy to do this for you, Jonathan. It's been a real honor, so thank you.
Yep. The best form of friendship is being able to show you're a friend.
Thank you for listening. Visit boglecenter.net to make a contribution to the Jonathan Clements Getting Going on Savings Initiative and read The Best of Jonathan Clements, classic columns on money and life. This concludes this special podcast. We'll have a new episode next month and hopefully meet many of you in October in San Antonio. In the meantime, visit boglecenter.net, bogleheads.org, the Bogleheads Wiki, Bogleheads Twitter, the Bogleheads YouTube channel, Bogleheads Facebook, Bogleheads Reddit. Join one of your local Bogleheads chapters and get others to join. Thanks for listening.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brizard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Fi. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to Fi. Cheers.